Welcome to Season 2 of RecLess, the podcast making you smarter and more knowledgeable about the field of parks and recreation. Join hosts Shane Mize, Jay Tryon, and Tom Venniro, three career-long friends from around the country as they dive into the world of parks and recreation with a surprise guest each episode. Laughs, leadership, life. This is RecLess.
Welcome to RecLess. We are now on episode 10 of season 2. Glad to have you all with us. As always, I'm here with my co-hosts, Shane Mize and Jay Tryon.
What's up, gang?
Hey, guys.
Got Jay's name right in the intro. When we were in Maryland a week ago, he had made a point to share a story with someone of the two times in the, I think it was a 5-minute span that I did get his name incorrectly pronounced. So just got to make sure I'm on point today. Don't want to offend Jay or else he's going to share it with the world.
Is it one of those where you just start calling him big guy? You know, when you don't know someone's name. Hey, big guy.
Hey, buddy. How's your day, buddy?
Hey, buddy.
All right, guys. So as we look to further our quest in bringing the world of Parks and Rec to our colleagues and maybe the one listener who might not have anything to do with Parks and Rec,
I wonder about that. Like, how many are, like, obviously, maybe they just like the banter, but do they know anything about the industry? Or they maybe they want to get into Park and Rec, so that's why they go listen to it.
I know my in-laws are, like, my sister-in-laws are listening to it, which is maddening because, you know, they're not Parks and Rec professionals, and I don't know if they're just afraid of missing out on something that Hannah knows that they don't, or if they actually enjoy it. I don't know if it's a waste of an hour a week or what.
All right. Well, if you count Melissa and Hannah, then we've got at least 3 or 4.
That's right.
All right. So let's start off with a fun question for both of you today. We've talked a little bit about our conference experiences in the past. And obviously, most of our conferences, and Jay and I had the opportunity, no invite to Shane, of course, we had the opportunity to speak and be a part of the Maryland Park and Recreation Association conference a week ago. They do a great job. It was a first-class experience. I'm sure Jay can attest to that. I could see behind Jay and his screen, he's got his nice thank you letter right on his desk.
Ew.
So, you know, with all these conferences, they start with an association typically. And for me, I'll just give a little background and answer my own question before posing it.
Wow.
Yes, that's new, right? New technique. So honestly, getting involved at an association level was probably one of the biggest factors in me finding my passion for this profession. And ultimately, we've talked about networking so many times, right? So it allowed me to network and meet people from other agencies and see the passion that they bring to this field, that they bring to work every day. And it's just fed into what I was able to do and what really made me who I am today. I started off with a local association, and I believe one of my first experiences was joining a local board and putting on a smaller conference, a regional conference. Really great experience. You got a lot of fulfillment out of it. And you know, for me, it started with going to conferences. So taking that next step to maybe help plan one was a big deal to me, right? It helped me with my professional development, my confidence, my leadership. And then that led to other opportunities of leadership. And of course, meeting you two gentlemen in an association setting. Shane, obviously, our first interactions were with the YPN and part of that leadership team. And Jay, you joined not shortly after that. So what I wanted to ask you both, I would assume that prior to NRPA and the YPN, you had some involvement with maybe a state or some kind of association. And I want to hear that origin story. You know, how did you first get introduced or involved with maybe an association? I know we had Haley Herzing, who was a professional in the association world, and we talked a little bit about that, but we didn't really talk too much about maybe our involvement and past involvement. So what was that for you? What was that origin story? What got you into it? Maybe who was an individual who introduced you to that world?
I guess the very first association I was ever affiliated with, when I was coaching and when I was going to college to be a coach, there were some local coaches clinics that I went to from time to time. Wasn't really an association. I think the first real one that I was associated with was NIRSA, National Intramural Sports and Rec Association. when I was in the campus rec world, when I was in my master's at Western Illinois. And that was a really cool experience. First of all, it's a super energetic group. It's a very young group by definition. You have a lot of grad assistants there. And then you have a lot of really cool programs and events and fitness classes and things that just brings in a really young, youthful crowd. There's an energy there that you don't always feel at other conferences. I really enjoyed getting to know. I didn't realize at the time, it made a lot of sense, but I didn't realize at first there were grad assistants at other universities going through what I was going through. And that kind of opened my eyes to the idea of an association. Like there's somebody doing what you're doing, whether you're a crew leader on a mowing team, or you're a park and rec professional, or you're a campus rec, or I mean, as we talked about with Haley, if you're a dentist or a local pharmacy person, there's someone going through what you're going through in a different part of the world. And the association makes that world feel a little smaller, which was really cool. NERSA was a really cool group to be with because they had t-shirt exchanges and they just had more college atmosphere type programming and event. And that kind of was what got me interested in that. And then when I found out both locally at the state and nationally within RPA that we had something similar, I was very interested in going and comparing my experiences, seeing what it was like. Was it similar? Was it different? Was it more professional, less professional? You know, whatever, just trying to experience it. So NERSA was my first experience. A fellow grad was huge into NERSA at the time, Rusty Vineyard, who went all through the ranks, was the intramural director and an assistant director of campus rec, and then a director of campus rec on the West Coast. And now is like the associate vice president of something in University of Idaho, where he's over facilities, campus rec, student activities, all of it for the University of Idaho. But he's worked for Eastern Oregon, or Portland State, Eastern Oregon, Washington. He was from that Pacific Northwest. So after grad school, he worked his way back. He went to University of Mizzou as his first job, and then found his way going back towards the western part of the United States. But Rusty got me interested in it, and I've always been with some sort of association almost ever since.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned you were looking to see if it was more professional, less professional, and it seems that your goal has been to make it less professional as you have joined.
Absolutely. I try to bring everybody down to my level of rolling around in the mud whenever I can.
Well, I think the other thing that's interesting that he said was there seems to always be a mention of like, hey, a t-shirt exchange, because I've been waiting for a t-shirt for 10 years and I still haven't gotten one. So, he likes to just rub that in, that's one thing that NERSA does.
NERSA had a real cool t-shirt change because they had t-shirt awards every year for their, first, second, third place intramural competitions and sports clubs. So you'd bring a shirt, submit, but then you brought a bunch of leftover shirts, and they had a huge t-shirt swap where you were changing, I'll take this shirt for that shirt. So you'd leave there with polos or shirts from University of North Carolina and Notre Dame or whatever. And, it was very cool to experience all that. It was a cool opportunity. I wish NRPA had something like that.
That explains Shane's affinity for shirts. And we're still waiting to hear how he got so into eggs, but we get shirts now. Jay, how about you?
Right.
I don't have as much of a detailed background of it as Shane went into, but I will say my first probably interaction or introduction to an association type was similar to many other park and rec professionals, started at the YMCA and went to a regional YMCA conference. And that was kind of like an introduction of how things operate on the big picture. Because, I was entry level, first job out of college, and knew my world, knew my branch, how it operated. But then, going to a more regional conference, learning all these different associations within the Y and how they operate. And some have, indoor aquatics, some outdoor aquatics, and then different classes and sessions, and, learn the big picture of really how the Y operates, globally, not just from the Buffalo standpoint. I obviously did not stay very long with the Y. I was there for a little over a year before I moved over to what I'm in now. But I mean, that was definitely my introduction to it. But it was neat to see, people coming together with similar missions, similar goals, whether they were on one part of the state or the other part, but also, with the same mission, because even though it's a different branch with different goals, different communities they serve, similar to how we operate with Park and Rec, everyone's goal is to improve their community, provide the services. And that's what we were doing within the Y Association conference I was at.
That's great. And I would say probably we'll see similar or hear similar stories from people that they were involved in a conference and then maybe they were asked to participate in some way, shape, or form after, showing interest in being engaged in that conference. And I do want to give a shout out to Mike Stockman. I had mentioned an origin story, right? And that was the individual locally who got me involved. He was at the town of Victor. And Shane, you always like to make fun of, I always love the acronyms, right? So we always loved what do you call GVRPS?
Genesee Valley or something.
Yeah, Genesee Valley, but it's always something new every time. Shane
Every time
likes to talk about GVRPS. So, hey, that was a great discussion. I think I really enjoyed hearing a little bit about that, and it's going to be maybe a little bit of a theme of where we're going today. And let's waste no more time in getting into our guest. Our guest pseudonym for the day is Craniatic. So for our listeners who cannot see what we're seeing, Craniatic, they engage in the hobby of birding. So that has a little bit to do with that name, Craniatic.
So they're 80?
Oh, come on now. Our guest is a past avid cyclist and once rode through the Canadian Rockies and also took an 88-day cross-country bike tour. Studied undergraduate at Southern Illinois, Carbondale. Received their master's from Indiana University, Bloomington. Anything yet?
Well, if they're a biker, Indiana is a good spot. They do a lot of, I think they have the Little Indy bike race there. We'll have to see if I'm remembering that right from my time in the Midwest. It's like the Indy 500, but they do their version at the university level on bikes.
Shane knows some stuff.
I feel like he's making that up.
Could be.
When was the last time you got on a bike, Shane?
Man.
12?
Might have been. Might have been.
All right. Our guest, let's get back on track here. Our guest received the Distinguished Fellow Hall of Fame Award from their state association. Also attained a CTM, or a Competent Toast Master, from Toastmasters International, and a 26-year state association executive director. Our guest resides in the state of California.
I got nothing.
All right. Well, I could tell you that you both know this individual, but we had colluded yesterday to try to stump you, and it looks like we were successful. Please welcome our guest, current executive director of the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration, Jane Adams.
Jane Adams.
Jane, welcome.
Well, hello everyone. How are you?
Hello. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
It's going great. Good to see you this morning. Thanks.
Good to see you.
Wow, we stumped you. Yes.
That's good.
It is rare when we all know the guests that we can't get through those clues without one of the individuals guessing. So we did it. And
So
we are
was I right? The Little Indy?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, they do have the bike ride. Yep. But that was when I got started cycling. It was much later when I got started cycling. So.
Gotcha.
Is that what it's called? The Little Indy?
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping he would have something wrong.
I only knew that because one of the grads in my graduate degree came from Indy in their undergrad, and they'd go back every year and participate and talk about it. Yeah, Little Indy 500.
Yeah. Well, Shane, I learned that you went to Western Illinois, so that's never would have guessed that from.
Well, they don't tote it very highly. That's not it's not one they're proud of, I think.
All right.
So Jane, thank you for making the time. You have now been with the Academy since 2016. Is that accurate?
Yep. Yes.
And I would say, I think I mentioned this yesterday when we talked prior to the show, we've had a really, really great handful and representation from the Academy on our show. And so it's really a pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to start today with you by playing off of our intro discussion where we talked about associations. You obviously have a vast experience with the state of California. And of course, the Academy is its own different type of association. Mm-hmm. And so, with the group filled with such extraordinary individuals and led by one like yourself, can you just share a little bit with our listeners about the Academy, your role, but what is it like to really work with some of these individuals and lead a group of the greatest of the great in our profession?
Wow, you make it sound really important and really, really big. So I want to share a little bit about the history of the Academy before I fully answer that question, if I may. So the Academy was formed in Kansas City The director at that time was a gentleman named Frank Vedic. And Frank, many of the people that were invited, he wanted to continue to offer something to the profession, but he had already kind of served through state associations and through NRPA leadership, that kind of thing, but he felt he had more to give. And so he invited 25 people to come to a meeting room and to talk about how could we continue to contribute and to advance the profession, and what do we have to do to make that happen. So the academy was thusly formed, and some of the obviously our founding members are people like Ralph Kreider, who taught at the Revenue School for many years at Ogle Bay and was director of Los Angeles County Park Department and the City of Long Beach Park. Oh gosh, now I have a brain drain, right? Mary Grogan, who was a director, worked for 40-something years for the city of Modesto, California, was Pauline DeGrange, who was the first female director in the state of California with the city of San Diego. We had a number of educators that were actively involved in the beginning, Burt Brantley, Doug Sessoms, all of these South Carolina, North Carolina educators that were involved. And they really did not want to duplicate. Our goal is not to duplicate NRPA. And so we strive to provide those programs and services that help, advance the profession in a very broad way, very broad way. As an example, one of the programs that the Academy is a founder of is the CAPRA accreditation program, the agency accreditation. So that was thought up by two Academy members, Betty Vandersmissen and I think Lou Twarzik. And they said, hey, if we're going to advance the profession, we need to advance the operations and the management of park and recreation agencies. And so let's create this accreditation program. So we worked closely, with NRPA. It's not that we did it all in a silo. We worked very closely with NRPA. And so now you all are very, very familiar with CAPRA accreditation. And there's now, I think, 250 agencies that are now accredited. So the Academy is very pleased to have been a part of that. And we started the first research journal, the Journal for Park and Recreation Administration. Again, one of our missions is research. And so we created this journal, and you can subscribe to the journal. You do not have to be an Academy member to subscribe to the journal. Online is very affordable. So if you want to find out what researchers are doing in the field of park recreation, that's another great way to do it. So I think the biggest, most exciting thing for me about working with the people that are members of the Academy is that we're always outward focused. We're always thinking about how can we help advance the profession, and how can we in fact play a leadership role. And I think that's very different work, and it's harder work. It's hard thinking strategically as well as thinking operationally, which, we have to do both, right, in our job. And so the Academy members of the board, like for instance, one of the things we most recently did, right after the George Floyd murder, we created, our president at the time, Mike McCarty from Illinois, wanted to create a JEDI effort. So we started with a Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force, and to address that. And we are probably the only organization in the country that has asked our members to sign a JEDI pledge. So what does that mean? That means that as an Academy member, you agree to promote, nourish, and embody an inclusive and equitable environment, not only in your own agency, but also in the field at large. And so that's the work that's exciting to me, and that's the work that I think can have a really big impact as we continue to advance the profession of parks and recreation.
You said Mike McCarty. No one's ever seen Tom and Mike McCarty in the same room. Do you see the resemblance? Isn't there a chance that it's like an urban? We don't know which one's which, to be quite honest. No, I got the opportunity to participate with Jane on an internal committee, I guess, where it was just looking at like all good associations do, looking at what we currently offer and what's the value to that in the industry, and are there things we should focus on and things that we could drop or whatever. I like saying, even the Constitution, even the founding fathers, we've had amendments since the original thing, right? So this is a question to you, not a question to you on behalf of the Academy or as the executive director of the Academy. If there were two or three things, whether it's consultants weren't as big of an item when the Academy was created, and now you have someone that served for so many years as a professional, and now they're a consultant, and
Right.
you even have some that are members like that.
Right.
What are the two or three amendments to what the Academy does that you think y'all should consider, or that you would make a recommendation to consider, whether it's service, age, or something totally different? Because something that's founded for as long as it has been and moves through so many different changes in our generationally, and as things have adapted and changed and progressed, you have to be able to move with it. Are there a couple things that you think should be considered when the Academy continues to look at itself and defines how it serves in our industry?
That's a really deep, thoughtful question.
I like to start out with deep
Thank
ones.
you. Let's don't do something easy. Let's go right deep. Let's go right deep.
My bad.
So I think many organizations, we always want to do more, right?
Sure.
We want to do more. We want to do more. We want to do more. And so I would like the Academy to say, what are the one or two things we're going to do, and we're going to do them really, really, really well.
Yeah.
Rather than keep adding on. A program that I think we do well, and I think if more energy could be devoted to that, and by energy I don't mean, it could be from more people involved, only as participants, especially, but is mentoring of young professionals. Because here we have these Academy members are seasoned administrators. They typically have been in the profession for 15 plus years. So they typically have served at a number of different levels as they advanced in their careers. So they have lots of experiences, right? And lots of on the ground learning, so to speak. So they're great mentors. They're really, really, really good mentors. And I think a lot of them really enjoy the mentoring. For instance, this year, I was just yesterday with the chair of our mentorship program, Sheila Kanzian, and we have 105 pairs
Oh, wow.
of mentors and mentees this year. We need more mentors, because some people are taking 2 mentees. But I think that's kind of a unique program that we could expand on a lot. And we work with the Young Professional Network on that one. I believe we promote the program through YPN, and we do promote it through the state affiliates as well. But I think that would be a truly impactful program that we could offer. I wish I had more time to spend in the National Gold Medal Award program. We're keep trying to figure out how can we get in and really call out that really neat information that agencies are supplying in the application of their Gold Medal Award. And so what are those gems, right? And not, we struggle all the time with what's an innovative practice, because what may be innovative in Texas has been going on for years in Virginia. So that's, when you talk about innovation, that's a really moving target. But so I'm going to call them gems. What are the gems that's going on in agencies all across the country? And then how can we share those gems? How can we share those gems? So we're starting to kind of get into that a little bit more. Finally.
I think when you hear Tom talk about the reverence he has for the Academy, and all of us do, I think it's because of our experience as young professionals and the mentoring and networking we received from various members, whether it was official through the externship program, or it was just an Academy member has mentored us along the way, whether they were doing it officially for an Academy reason or not. And I think that's one of the greatest things y'all provided, at least to me in my career, is that experience for sure.
Yeah, no
Yeah,
doubt. I just want to add to that really quick, Jay, before you get in here. It's just look at our guests, you know what I mean? And that mentorship program, I cannot speak enough about. That started a long time ago, but it's come a long way, as Jane alluded to. And Jody Adams, Jill Geller, Chris Nunes, Rosalind Johnson, these are all people that I've been associated with through that program at one point or another. And of course, I know you didn't really get into it much. We've talked about it before, but the three of us are all former externs of the academy. So
I know.
that's a whole nother program that I cannot speak highly enough of how well the academy does that, and really is pushing along those young professionals or recipients of that great honor to then be paired with other mentors. Not in the necessarily the formal mentorship program capacity, but you're paired with so many others, and I know we've all had great experiences with that as well.
Well, and I actually have like three different things I was going to get into, but since you just mentioned the extern program, I think that's a perfect segue into one of the things I wanted to ask Jane about. And I want to also preface this by saying not only is the extern program just a huge success for our industry, but also, it allows people to have an experience that they probably wouldn't get if they didn't have the opportunity to apply for an externship. But one of the other things that is really impactful that I love about it is the involvement that can happen after you get that scholarship and that externship opportunity. So example of this, Tom, myself, and several others are on a couple of different committees to still be involved in some capacity in that program. And just kudos to the academy to let people still be involved in any capacity that we can be involved, because not only are we still impacting the program from being a former extern, but hopefully allowing others to see that this is not just a one time, get an opportunity, go to conference, have a mentor, and grow from it there, but it's going to be, lifelong. So my question to you is back to what Shane had asked about, what are some of the things that you have like longstanding? Tom and I went to the banquet last year and we sat right up in front and obviously got to hear Janet talk and then introduce Tracy. And Tracy's a phenomenal person who was on the show not that long ago, a couple of weeks ago. But obviously there's always a new president-elect that comes in. How does the group choose someone and make sure that what the person did the year before doesn't just go away with the new vision for the new president?
Yeah, that's that is a problem, or it can be a problem. But so this year, under the leadership of Tracy and Cindy Sullivan, who's going to be next year's president, we have developed a 3-year impact plan. And we're not calling it a strategic plan, we're calling it an impact plan. And so and the board agreed that's it for 3 years. There's going to be nothing added to that because we want to, again, focus in on what's going to be the most impactful. And so we have hopefully wrestled that. And once I think that gets ingrained in your organizational culture, that then it becomes easier to sustain. But I think those first couple years can be really, really challenging. I know when I was working at TPRS, we would, get together as a staff and we'd say, okay, what are going to be our priorities this year? And one of the staff members finally said, well, wait a minute, can we talk about what's our ongoing work, right? What's the work we have to do every day? And so I said, okay, let's talk about that. So we created huge pieces of paper all around the room. What do we have to do for the conference? What do we have to do for the magazine? What do we have to do for advertising? What do we have to do for training programs? What do we have to do? Open the mail, right? Open the mail, answer the phone, all these things. And we discovered that 90% of our time was spent doing operational things, which left you 10% of your time, and probably less, to do strategic things. And when I think more organizations need to acknowledge that, because we get so wrapped up in the let's do more. And I think, no, let's sit back and let's think about what our priorities are. And certainly for you all in working in communities, it's driven by what are your community priorities, right? Which are different from an organizational priority. So I think, I don't know, I hope I answered your question.
No, that's great. No, knowing there's a shorter 3-year plan that everyone can work on together is great. And obviously, everyone in the academy, obviously they typically know each other and they're very friendly with one another. So there's never been that I've seen, and hopefully it's never come up, but a procedure of going from one to the other, and then the last person feels like they're not having the impact, because everyone is so open to working together. So that should be a 3-year plan or longer that can make that impact together. And then the other side of it goes along with just like the vision, so that person that's coming into it knows that, okay, like I'm going to work on this, and then I have a year or 2 years, whatever it is, to continue that plan. So that's great.
So Jane, I believe that the three of us could talk or ask you questions about the academy for more than an hour. And so because of that, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and play off a little bit of what Jay had just mentioned, being that there's different leadership that's constantly rotating with any kind of association, traditionally or typically, and then there's an executive director in most cases that really keeps it all together. You certainly are no stranger to associations, and 26 years with one state association, that's a lot of time. And I would imagine that, you've got a lot of success stories from your time in California. And in California, no offense to any of the smaller states out there, but as I understand, is one of, if not the largest association out there in parks and recreation. So, I wanted to just ask you, how did you pull together that success? What drove you to really put the work in that you did for 26 years for the state of California, and maybe share a couple of those success stories with us?
Yeah, well, I'll go back, drop back quickly to my origin story, right? Because you all
Perfect.
asked your origin story. So when I was a student at Southern Illinois University, the professors, each and every professor, drilled into our heads that as a professional,
Right.
you had to be involved in the professional organization. That there was like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So as a student, I joined the Illinois Park and Recreation Association, and drove from Southern Illinois, Carbondale up 6 hours to Chicago, and slept 6 to a room to go to the Illinois Park and Recreation Association conference. So it was a seed planted in me when I was a student, and so everywhere I moved, every state I lived in or worked in, I joined that professional organization. So I was working in Wisconsin. I was served as their first executive director for the Wisconsin Recreation and Park Association. And at that time, NRPA had regional offices. You guys may or may not remember that or not, but there was a regional office in Sacramento. And so I really wanted to move to California. So I applied for that regional director's job and got it. And at that time, NRPA and CPRS physically shared an office. And so right away, I got to meet the executive director and the staff, and then the leadership of the California organization. So when I first walked in the door in California, so to speak. So I did a lot of traveling because I had really hard states to visit. I had Hawaii, Arizona, Washington, Oregon. It was torturous, Columbia. It was really hard. It was a hard job to go to those places. But I was on the road a lot, right? So I had a child, and so I needed to think about being closer to home. So the California job became available, and I applied for that. So that's how I got into that job. And I think it's because I knew many of the leaders in the CPRS at the time, because I was working for NRPA. So I think it in the beginning it was overwhelming. Jay, you just started a brand new job. You're drinking from a fire hose, right?
That is, people use that term all the time, but it is so true.
And you're going to drink from that fire hose for at least a year.
Yep.
It's just constant. So the first year was pretty much a blur, right? Pretty much a blur. And at that time, we had a huge board. We had 26 people on the board of directors. It was ungodly, So one of the first things that we attempted to do was to downsize the board of directors. That was in and of itself a huge achievement, because you're asking people to literally vote themselves off the board, right? And they did. They showed courage. They showed leadership, and they recognized that to get better, we needed to get smaller. So that was, I think, one of my first successes, was to be a part of that downsizing of the state board of directors. My biggest, most proudest achievement with the California Park and Recreation Society was the development of the Parks Make Life Better brand. And we conducted the first public opinion polling where we did in-depth interviews with people. I sat in and watched citizens talk about why they value parks recreation. And one of the interviews still is in my brain. Two of them are still in my brain. One of them was, she was a Southern California resident and she worked part-time at Disneyland. But at the end of her shift, rather than get on the freeway and sit on the freeway for 2 hours, she would go to a local Anaheim park and she would spread her little blanket out and she would take a book and water, bottle of water, and she would read under the tree for an hour, and then she'd get in her car and have a much better drive home. So she shared that one time because she went to the same park, had her under the same tree. It was part of what her thing was. So she went to the park one day, and this is her word. She said, someone was sitting underneath my tree.
Mhm.
Her tree.
Yeah.
My tree. They were sitting, and I had to go sit under another tree, and I didn't like it because I wanted to sit underneath my tree. And I'm just like, wow, how cool is that?
Yeah.
That this woman really identified with that place as being hers, right? So another story was this other woman was sitting that she shared that she just liked to go to the park and she liked to sit on the bench and she just liked to sit on the bench and look around. And the interviewer, a great guy, said, so do you have a backyard? And she said, yeah. And he said, well, do you have grass in your backyard? Yes, I have grass. Do you have flowers in your backyard? Yes, I have flowers. Do you have trees? Yes, I have trees. So why do you go to the park? And when people are thinking, they look upper right? Their eyes go upper right. So she went, I'm free. And he goes, you're free? She goes, yeah, I'm free. He said, I can sit there on that park bench and I'm free. I don't have to fold the laundry. I don't have to answer the phone. I don't have to pick up stuff after my kids. I'm free to just sit there. And so I think, these are little tiny moments, right? Little tiny moments, but they add up. They add up. And I did a workshop once in Los Angeles, and we were talking about how parks do make life better. And I asked for a volunteer from the audience, and this, young man came up, and I said, so what do you do? And he said, well, he was a park maintenance worker, and he said, I cut the grass for the park. And I said, oh, that's a really important job. And he goes, no, I cut grass.
Mhm.
And I'm like, no. You don't know when you get off work, you don't know who comes back later in the night, later in the day, and sits down and spreads out a blanket and has a picnic or has maybe proposes to their girlfriend that they want to get married, or maybe you might see a toddler learning to walk going across the grass that you just cut. So you're creating beautiful spaces for people to enjoy their lives. And you need to pay attention to that and take that in. You're not just cutting grass. You're just not cutting grass. And I think if there's one thing we need to do in this profession, get a little preachy, sorry guys, is we really need to talk about our work relative to the outcome. As a result of what I do, cutting grass, what is then allowed to happen? And I think if we can talk about our work using the outcome language, I think people's eyes, they kind of light up. They go, oh yeah, I get that. Yeah, I teach swimming. No. I teach a life skill, right? I teach a life skill. I would encourage anyone to sit down with their staff and say, okay, what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve here? And I'm not talking about 50 people coming to. I listened to the podcast about your Easter egg, And so, yeah, we want to be sure everybody that comes has an opportunity to pick up an egg. But why? Why is picking up that egg so important, right? And so, really spend some time, keep diving, keep asking, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And I think that's when people can get excited about their work.
That's a fantastic answer to that question, Jane. I really appreciate you sharing those stories. And before someone else chimes in, I do want to say the impact of the Parks Make Life Better campaign was huge. I remember that from one of the first NRPA conferences I ever attended, going to a session and hearing about it, and it impacted a smaller organization and agency all the way in Western New York. We took a lot of the principles from that, put it into nature programming, and really started to enhance our parks. And a funny, quick little story, or a really great story of how much that impact still, that campaign still has an impact. When I was at the national conference this past year in Dallas, I went to a session. Jill Geller was in that session with me. She had just been paired as my mentor for the mentorship program. She saw me from across the room. We waved. After the session, she came up to me and she gave me a challenge coin, a really, really beautiful token. And on that token, it said on one side, I believe, the Parks Make Life Better, you know, the logo. And then on the other side, it said, you make life better. And it was such a great, so people are taking what you've done, or, you know, what you accomplished with that, and they're taking it to whole new levels. And, you know, I believe in every word of it.
Well, I think I want to make it really clear. It was not me doing the work. It was this huge team of people doing the work. And we, you know, we failed. We failed. When we first started the campaign, we failed. And I had to go to the board of directors and said, we have failed, which is hard to do, right? It's hard to say we've made a mistake. And because we've made a mistake, I need more money.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about a bad day.
Right.
That was pretty rough. But the board at that time said, yeah, they agreed. Yes, we stumbled. And we needed to have more outside help because we could not do this ourselves. We were too ingrained. We needed outside help. And so that was a huge, huge learning experience for me personally and professionally. But sometimes it's okay to say, I have made a mistake. I need to fix this. How will you help me fix it? Right. And I think sometimes we don't say that enough.
Well, Jan, I love the story that you were telling about the individual that said it makes me, you know, feel free and don't have to do anything, work around the house or answer the phone. And it kind of makes me think of an initiative Shane did last year with his master plan when he was allowing people to write in their parks, you know, what was special to them about parks. And the reason why I bring that up is you could go and ask that same question to 100 people at a different park and anywhere in the country, and their answer is going to be different. And, you know, why they're there or why it's important to them. And I'm kind of curious to put Shane on the spot. Like, how many different answers did you see in that initiative that you did when you're getting the responses from your community?
Yeah, that Parks Matter Because campaign. I mean, there were way more variety of answers than there were similar answers. And it was on a chalkboard trailer, Jane. So we would wipe it clean and go back out. And we drove that thing over close to 150 miles inside our city limits to try to engage the public. And yeah, you definitely saw a lot of differences. And it was inspiring at times. And our folks took photos of the really good ones, and we have them to see things that you're like, you know, because my child with disabilities needs a place to feel like they don't have a disability. And you're like, whoa, I just thought we were putting some playgrounds near residential areas sometimes. I mean, even as a park and rec professional, who I think all three of us that host this get why parks matter, there are times that you're still just thinking what you're doing is only limited to, in your head, your scope. And it is a constant great reminder when other people are impacted by what you do differently than how you thought the impact would be.
Absolutely. Wow. That sounds great. I'd like to see a picture of that.
Yeah, it worked. It went really well. We won a couple awards for it. I can definitely send you some stuff.
Great. Very cool.
And I'll also piggyback to what Tom said. It was one of my very first conferences. It might have been Baltimore in 2009 when I was given a sticker of Parks Make Life Better. And I got the sticker, and I'll never forget it. It was one of those, like, almost like an epiphany moments where, like, you look at something, you read something, and then you're like, that is genius, but simple and so true. Yeah. And then I went back to our agency that I was working at the time, and we kind of had a group discussion about that. And it's like, hey, like, how can we take this and make it our own to make sure that people know this? Because everyone loves to go to their local park or loves to come to the programs, but they're not thinking about the true impact, long-term, maybe short-term sometimes, that it's having. But I'll never forget getting that sticker. So, kudos to you and the team of creating that, and that'll live on forever.
I hope it does. I really do.
I agree. I agree with what's said. It's something that it hits you so quickly how simple it is and how impactful it is. And I think even subconsciously, things like the Parks Matter Because trailer probably stole a lot from it without even, thinking about it at the time. It was in our mindset what we were trying to do, which y'all had already done.
Right.
With you having a lot of experience in our industry and getting really exposed to a lot of people, whether it was the NRPA work, the California work, or even the work through the academy, I wanted to ask you, there has to be someone that when they speak, whether it was at your conference or an NRPA conference or a conference that you're attending, is must-see TV, so to speak. Someone that no matter what you're doing at that conference, whether you're speaking or putting it on or just attending, you would clear your schedule for. Who is that for you?
Oh, I hope they won't be embarrassed, but I don't think he does much speaking anymore, but it's Mike Shellito. He was the director of Parks, Recreation, and Libraries in Roseville, where Jill is now, and then he moved into the city manager role. Mike just has a really great way of explaining things in a way that bring you along. So he doesn't. There's no talking down to you, but he just he has so much in his head he wants to share. And I think sometimes that we all get excited when we feel very passionate about something. But I just always, every time I heard Mike talk, I always learned something new or thought about something from a very, very different perspective. Miss not seeing him.
When I served on the NRPA program committee, when I first got on, so it was years ago, I remember he was the first person. We used to, if your session proposal scored in the top 50, you were an automatic. And I think, Jay, they're doing that in some capacity now again. But at one time, the very first time I experienced someone scoring multiple times in the top 50, it was one of Mike's proposals. One year he had 3 or 4 score in the top 50, and we had a quality control function that wasn't supposed to allow someone to speak more than a couple times.
Right.
And we broke that rule for his because all 3 of his sessions scored really high. And I've never gotten to hear him speak, but I know of him just through my time in the program committee.
Right. Yeah. And I always loved Ellen O'Sullivan's sessions too. She always did a lot of sessions on trends. And so, these individuals have, retired and kind of moved on by now. But yeah, Mike and Ellen were probably always my 2 top.
Do you have someone, and this will be a follow up to because those 2 have retired. Mm-hmm. Do you have someone, and it's not deep, but I think it's going to be tough for you because you're associated with so many people. Do you have somebody that you're intrigued by or you admire from a distance that you have absolutely no connection with? So you didn't work with them in the academy, or you didn't work with them on a membership association or group, but you've heard of them or you see them, or every time you hear their name, they're doing something impressive, but you don't know them at all. You're just intrigued by them because of the ramifications of what you're hearing about from their impact.
Wow.
I mean, it's obviously Jay, right? But other than Jay.
Jay's name was right there on the
right there.
Yep.
Right there.
Oh, man.
Gosh, I don't know if I can answer that question, Shane.
Okay.
Because I don't want to dismiss anyone. I mean,
sure.
I don't know if you've had the opportunity to ever have a conversation with Christine Stratton, the CEO of NRPA, but she is an amazing woman, amazing, thoughtful, caring person who, does not have a park and recreation background, but
right.
I think she is doing an incredibly stellar job of leading NRPA into, what some people may not be comfortable going, but she's got the board of directors, and I think they're doing some really, 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 really good work. And so maybe give a plug to have Christine come on in.
I rode an elevator with it one time, but that's got to be a tough job to sit at the top of this profession and guide so many leaders with so many different opinions on stuff, and probably something you could relate to in your experiences as well.
I always say, you never. When I was a young professional, I worked for St. Louis County Park Department, and the head of the department was Mr. Kennedy. Yeah, Mr. Kennedy, that's what everybody called him. He was a master at getting land given to the county, masterful. And so he would go visit people who had beautiful, beautiful acreage of, horse ranches or whatever, rolling hills in St. Louis County, and he would just meet with them, and he would, like one lady, Mrs. Larimar, I think, there's now a county park, but he just went to her estate and knocked on the door one day and said, could I have permission to walk around your estate? And the housekeeper said, well, I'll ask. And she came back and said, yes, you could. So Wayne Kennedy, Mr. Kennedy, went back every season for 5 years. Every season.
Wow.
He knocked on the door and said, may I just have another stroll around the property? And finally, he was invited in for coffee. And he got invited in for coffee, and then he began having conversations. And she was an elderly lady. And finally, he said, well, what have you thought about what's going to happen? I mean, he didn't do this the first time they had coffee, but, again, another year down the line, have you thought about what you're going to do with this land when you are no longer here? And she said, no, I have, but I haven't decided. And he said, well, would you consider gifting it? And she ended up gifting this land. So, I mean, there's millions of stories, and some of these people, we don't even know their story. Like last night, I went to a retirement party for a colleague here in California that had been in the community worked in the community for 20-something years, not always as a director, but worked his way up. And it was just fantastic how people were commenting upon his leadership in the city and the impact that he had, and how he always made people feel special, how he always was, he was always smiling, which is very true. It's his personality. But everybody there was just obviously, and it was a huge community gathering. There must have been 200 people, 300 people there. So it definitely came from the community focus, but a lot of people just talked about how much he had given and how they had recognized what he had given. And I just think if more people, more young professionals can hear these kind of talks, can hear what people are saying generally from their heart about the work that we do, I think it gives us more inspiration when we have a really shitty days. Am I allowed to say that word?
Yeah, sure.
Really bad days. How am I gonna get through this day, right? Because something totally crappy has happened. This is when we need to go in and pull up the thoughts of the impact that we have, and to try to focus on what's right rather than what's wrong.
You mentioned something interesting. The Academy's has done some of those Hall of Fame type
Legends, yeah, our legends.
The Legends program, and it's the way to capture the impact people had on our industry that the newer generation folks coming through don't know about. We appreciate and we benefit from all those impacts, but we don't necessarily know about them. I always think of it. I don't know, Jane, how much of a football fan you are, but I always think of the football life stories where they'll highlight Bill Parcells. He played football, then he went to college, and he went coaching, and they'll talk to different people that were along his way, and they do an hour-long show, and it's really cool. And they do it about coaches, players, etc. I remember being on that steering committee last year that Legends was something that was talked about, and I think you are trying to figure out a way that it can be impactful and used for current generations. Do you have any updates on how something but it's great to hear about those stories.
It's exciting. Yeah. So on our website, which is www.aatra.org, we have across the top, we have one called Programs. And if you go down on that, it says Legends. And we're supposed to have kind of compilation videos where University of Utah, Dan Dustin, sorry, I can't remember who else worked with him on that project. I apologize to this individual. But they created some theme videos, which are really pretty freaking amazing to listen to. So they went in, and because we've got like 40 something interviews of people, some of them in the beginning are pretty long. And so we're trying to come up with a format now that is quicker, and trying to insert like, more photos and things like that to make it more interesting to take a look at. But yeah, our Legends program, I think, is a great, it's a great program. Great program. And thank you for bringing that up. It is there. It is there. So we have lessons from the Legends, the National Park Service Legends, Recreation for All, which is with Academy member John McGovern, who's one of the biggest, access professionals we have. We have one called Shattering Stereotypes and Glass Ceilings, where we talk about women in Parks and Recreation. And then we have one on America's expanding liberal democratic traditions. And we have one on Pay It Forward, and one on 7 characteristics of success. So these are available right now for anyone to take a look at. Appreciate that plug.
Great question, Shane. And Jane, as we, spend our final moments with you today, it definitely seems as if we could have you back as a 2-time guest. We also want our guests and listeners to get to know about you a little bit too. So we're gonna maybe end today with a couple rounds of what we call kind of a rapid fire. They're going to be some quick questions. We just want some quick hitter answers back from you. And given that you've worked for California and you've worked with some really wonderful individuals, Shane asked this question a few times, once most notably to Joe Turner, who had a great answer. But being in the state of California, you've got it's a big market. Who would you say, if you wouldn't mind sharing with us and our guests, is maybe the most famous or notable person in your quote unquote Rolodex, your phone? Have you had the opportunity to, and I know you could list a ton of Academy members. Let's exclude them. Let's just go maybe outside of it. Is there anybody, I know you got Hollywood, you got sports teams. Is there anyone you'd like to share? I know you got connections, Jane.
Amy Tan. There you go.
Okay.
I wish I had her in my Rolodex, but I don't. Oh, yeah.
I'll ask the next question. Where's your favorite place to travel outside the United States?
New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Okay. Cool. Okay. What about inside the States? Favorite state to visit?
Wow. There's so many I haven't seen. Really tough.
Okay. Well, then what's the first one on your list right now that you want to go see that you've not visited yet?
Thank you. Appreciate that question. Vermont.
Okay. All right. How about we'll stay along those lines? Parks and Rec, favorite park. Put a plug in for a park that we should all go visit in the States.
The one right down my street.
Well, what is that?
What's it called?
It's called the Seymour Parkway. So it's a 2-mile parkway, and I can walk from literally my front door all the way to the Sacramento River, which is 2 miles away, without crossing a street.
Nice.
Sounds
very, very lovely. And during COVID, it was a freeway.
So hopefully you don't have many stressful days, but let's say you've had a stressful day or a stressful week and you just need to get away from it all. What does get away from it all look like to you?
A glass of wine.
Simple. I like it.
Just relaxing. Okay.
I also pour wine on weekends. So I also pour wine. So I have gotten to be, to know a little bit more about wine, and I enjoy, especially now that it's nice, go sit out in the backyard and have a glass of wine.
Nice.
Okay. Keeping with the food and beverage theme, what about your favorite restaurant or type of meal?
I want my mother's fried chicken.
Okay.
Sadly, I'm never going to have again because she's no longer with us. But I love my mother's fried chicken, and I loved her chocolate chip cookies. So
where did you grow up? Where was your mother from?
St. Louis.
St. Louis. Okay. Well, this is the last one for me, and if my co-hosts have any, great. But I just want to end with culinary. Staying on that, you are into the culinary arts, as I understand. Is that correct? So what's your go-to? If you were to have the 3 of us over for dinner, what are you choosing? What are you serving us?
Seared sea bass with garlic mashed potatoes with a artichoke vinegar reduction.
Well, I believe you have Jay and I attending. Shane is very particular. You might get him with the potatoes, but
yeah, My RSVP might have got stuck in the mail.
You're not a fish guy, huh? You're not a fish
No,
guy.
no, or an artichoke guy.
That's why you live in Texas. That's why you live in Texas.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Okay, or I could get my son-in-law to smoke tri-tip.
Now we're talking.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.
So, in the Robert Frost poem, The Road Less Traveled, he talks about two paths being just as good. He chose one. So, we're not talking about regret or whatever, but what other opportunity did you veer from that you think back and wonder what would have happened if I'd have tried that path?
You know, when I graduated from SIU, I wanted to go to graduate school, and I applied to two schools. I applied to Indiana University, and I applied to Texas A&M.
Mm.
And in my little 21-year-old brain, I said, whoever I hear from first is where I'm going to go. How about that for decision-making capability?
There you go.
So IU's came one day, and Texas A&M's came the next day.
Oh, wow.
But I said, I'm going to the first one I got heard from. So I went to Indiana University, which I don't regret. But I believe that if I had gone to Texas A&M, my career might have been very, very different because it's more of a natural resource based school, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that at that time, John Prompton was, one of the, was one of the biggest professors out there, talking a lot. And I often think that what if I had gone to A&M? Where would my career have gone? Yeah. And then a couple in February, went to Yosemite National Park, which that is my favorite park, in addition to my neighborhood park in Yosemite. And I said to the friends I was with, I said, I think if I could do my career again, I'd probably become a national park ranger. And they went, what? And I said, I love being outside so much, and of course I look horrible in a hat, so I don't know about the little Smokey the Bear hat, but I often wonder. Of course, now they have more law enforcement, responsibilities and dealing with people who want to have a picture with a bison or have a picture with a bighorn sheep, which is, not a good idea. But anyway, so I think maybe
that would be cool.
Well, that is fascinating, and Jane, we really appreciated your time today. I had an amazing time. The conversation was so intriguing. So thank you so much for giving us that.
Well, thank you, and congratulations, Jay, on your new job.
Thank you.
Hope you are, and I hope you get your tire fixed.
Yeah,
and,
good luck with it.
It's going great, but yeah, thank you for your time here. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome. Take care, Jane.
Okay, bye-bye.
Wow, so that was a treat. I have had limited interactions with Jane, but when I do, she's been extremely welcoming. And in Dallas, we had a really wonderful short conversation, and she'd extended, hey, if you ever need anything, it had nothing to do with RecLess, but if you ever need anything, reach out. She had expressed how much she leans on people that are, maybe earlier on in their career. And she had talked about the mentorship program, right? And how important that is. But she seems to have a lot of respect for what we do and those who are even younger than us in pushing our mission in Parks and Rec. So really great conversation. And I hope you guys enjoyed it too.
This won't surprise you how much, but I don't hold a lot of people and as I revere them or have like super awe about seeing them or meeting them. But I remember learning about who she was and the impact she had and running that state association for as long as she did when I was first getting introduced to the academy and definitely having a little bit of awe around her. I didn't even really get to talk to her much. It was just one of those that when she walks into a room, other people stop talking about what they're talking about and they start talking about Jane, and when you experience that as a young professional, you're like, okay, who is she? What has this lady done that everyone is talking about her? And you find out pretty quickly. I think when you highlighted the campaign, it was one of those things that's when I first heard about that. She was the executive director of California Parks and Rec, and she started, she created that campaign. And, it was great of her to be as humble as she was, but I'm sure she was the driving force about that campaign coming out and hitting the mark that she wanted it to hit. And it did. And I was definitely someone that was in awe of her the first time I heard about her and the impact she had had.
Yeah, similar here. I mean, I don't know that I've had a lot of conversations with her outside of just how's conference going, saying, hey, asking, how the academy is looking for different meetings I've been in. But hearing a little bit more about her history is great. I've always looked up to her for the leadership from the academy perspective. That's really only my knowledge of, getting to know her is through academy banquets and meetings and just kind of her involvement with that. But there's so much more to it. And, it's great to spend some time with her.
Yeah, that was a great pull, Tom.
Yeah, well, this is the season of Tom. So, it's only downhill from here for me, but
Right.
I have high hopes for you two gentlemen. And we will end this episode on that note. Guys, thanks for making the time. It was really good to kind of get back on track with you all. And I know we had a couple weeks off there for some vacations and whatever it may be, but I had a lot of fun today. So I'll see you both next time, and we'll see all of you next time on RecLess.
Yeah.
Hey, guys.